Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Pathways with Sweetling. And if you are new here, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. As you can see, today I'm not alone. I am with one of my favorite classmates, cohort members, and colleague. And today she's going to be sharing her story in relation to the BPsych Equivalent Programme, how she got in. We also want to know who she is, where she's from, what she studied before that. We just want to learn more about her journey and see how that can impact us as we prepare to apply for either the BPsych Equivalent or PGDip in psychological counselling. So if you are interested in that, then please stay tuned. Welcome to Psychology Pathways with Sweetling, where we guide future registered counselors one pathway at a time. My name is Sita Dwaba, and I am so glad that you're here. Let's begin. Hi Jess, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. It's really I really appreciate having conversations with people, and more so in this season having conversations about registered counselling or anything related, and if we can equip people to be better prepared for this journey, then why not?
100%. I remember before getting into this course, I remember how stressful it was, and so I would have loved to have something like this way back when.
Yes.
So this, I think, will hopefully be very valuable to those who are watching now.
Yes, I hope so too. So I hope you guys are watching and I hope you guys enjoy. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, nothing too personal, everything related to obviously where you are right now and on your journey to registered counselling. So could you maybe please tell us a little bit about yourself? So who is Jess? How did she end up in the BPsych Equivalent Programme at SACAP? What did you study before this program? And then just also a little bit of maybe what you plan on doing or where you plan on going after this.
Okay, so I'm a little bit older than most students who come here, so my background will be slightly longer. You might have to remind me of a couple of the questions as we go through, but I actually started, my first degree was in film, and so I got a degree in motion picture production way back in 2008.
Okay.
So straight after high school, and then so I did that. I was a video editor for quite some time and worked on music videos, and I did stuff for Supersport for a long time. It was a freelance work, and while I was doing that, I actually was volunteering at an animal shelter. And through that, I met some people who got me involved in studying animal behavior. Okay. So that was my second degree that I went into studying that. And then after that, I had a couple of kids. And when you're studying animal behavior, you study a lot of neuroscience because you have to know how the mammalian brain works and how emotions work. But essentially, it's kind of capped to about a 2-year-old brain because it's mostly emotional stuff. It's not the cognitive stuff, because as far as we know, animals don't have the same sorts of cognitions that humans do. So when I had my second child, he had some neurological difficulties, and I needed to learn more about people and more about human psychology. And so I did a parenting education certificate, got involved in that, and then I just was like, I need to know all of the things. So I looked up, studying psychology, and I thought, this is fine. I read these books on the side, it's fine, I'll just do this as a side thing. And so I did my undergrad with SACAP online.
Okay.
And I kind of always wanted to do the registered counsellor route. I didn't really have the goal of being a psychologist, because the first time I went to counselling was when my youngest son was having a seizure, and he went into a state called status epilepticus, which is a seizure that doesn't stop. And he was having a seizure for a total of 52 minutes. And so he'd been having seizures for the whole year. He had about anywhere between 4 and 20 a day. And they got progressively longer and longer and longer. And this particular one, we had to rush into the hospital, 5 o'clock traffic, trying to get there. And so that was a pretty traumatic experience. Don't worry, I've been to therapy. This was essentially the start of my journey. And the first person that I found myself getting very angry with my child. So he survived, he's fine, he's about to turn 8. But I found myself getting very angry with him, and I recognized this to be how could you have put me through this? Like you nearly died, and I was blaming him for doing that to me. And I recognized that this is not a healthy dynamic. So I found a counselor. I didn't even know that registered counselors were a thing. I was looking for a psychologist. I wanted them to be a mom. I wanted them to understand what it's like to be a mom, and to kind of recognize that strange dynamic that you have with a child where you can love and hate them at the same time.
Yes.
And I couldn't find anyone. I was like, I'm asking for help. People always talk about how it's so hard to ask for help. I'm fine with asking, but where does it come from? I don't know how to get the person. And a friend of mine actually said, but why don't you go to this other friend, a mutual friend of ours? And I was like, but what do you mean? She's like, she's a registered counsellor. And I was like, what's that? She's like, no, she she does trauma counselling. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll go. And that first session changed my life. Because it was just about having someone to sit and listen and walk me through that emotional process, and just to actually process the things that I didn't know that I was processing. I was thinking about it and I was trying to make sense of everything, but I wasn't processing the emotions. And from there I was hooked, and I decided that was the route, was to become a registered counsellor, because I knew how much difference, even though it's not long-term therapy, how big of an impact that can have in changing the trajectory of someone's life.
Sure.
So that was the goal for me. So I did undergrad with SACAP, and then always had the dream of getting into the BPsych program, because that was for me the best way. I didn't want to do the academic honors because I didn't want to do a master's and go to the psychology route, psychologist route. But we know that the getting into BPsych is not easy, so that was always hanging over my head of what happens if we don't. So that was the journey, and just I'm very, very grateful that I did eventually get in, and that here we are.
Sure. Wow, this is actually the first time I'm hearing the story, obviously, in this depth. I know that you did a lot of things in relation to animal behavior, and I know that you still do a little bit of that even now, but it's so interesting hearing how you got into that, and how that eventually also led you into somewhat the psychology field, and then your personal life as well. And I think a lot of people who study psychology because of a lot of things that have happened in their lives. Definitely. And I think it's these stories that panelists or people who are selecting candidates who are going to be suitable for the BPsych Equivalent Programme, or even the master's programs, these are the stories that they're looking for. They're not looking for perfection. They're not looking for somebody who hasn't been through anything, hasn't experienced anything. They're looking for people who are actually going to be able to use what they've experienced and what they've gone through, and kind of use that to propel them forward. You know, and even in the counseling space, I can imagine how that allows you to be able to sit with clients and kind of see them beyond what the world would possibly see them.
100%. I think that exactly what you said about how the panelists are looking for your personal stories, and also they're looking at how you approached it.
Yes.
So it's what you've gone through, and then how you have made sense of that, how you have dealt with that. And I think that's a really important thing, that if you can articulate that, if you can explain to somebody that this was my journey, and even if you're still in it, because like we're all still in it, you know, you're never done, but this is how I'm working through things. These are the things that I put into practice. This is how I get through my day. I'm still seeing a therapist. I do yoga every day. Whatever you're doing to keep yourself going, it's just to show that you have you've found insight into your own patterns, into your own ways of being, and I think that goes a really long way. It's not about the output that you've done, like your grades. Yes, you have to, you know, your academics count, but ultimately that counts for, I believe, a lot less than how you got there. So while you were getting those grades, what were you doing? How did you get there? Were you managing all these other responsibilities at home? How did you do that? What strengths did you have? And if you can bring that to the table, the story of how you got to where you are, I think that goes a really long way into allowing them to understand who you are.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really think that it's going to definitely impact whoever's listening and help them kind of dig into themselves and see what are those things, maybe even what are those challenges that I have faced in my life and how did I overcome them. And I think the biggest element when it comes to the field of psychology, or the biggest thing you can have, or biggest strength, or biggest skill you can learn and have for yourself, is the ability to reflect, to be able to look within yourself, look at where you've come from, what you've experienced, and how did you overcome that. What are some of the things you learned about that experience, or even from that experience? And I really think that really can take you a long way. So thank you very much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
All right, so my next question for you is, what, obviously you've already shared why you chose the BPsych Equivalent Programme, and you've shared that this has always been the goal for you. You didn't want to go into masters. So what was the application process like for you? I'm interested in knowing that.
I think it was also during a time where there was so much going on, because it was, filling out all the forms while you're still trying to do all your other schoolwork. I have a big family, and so everything was, very intense. But what I leaned into was that I had a really wonderful supervisor in my will program, and I had a really wonderful lecturer who had built relationships with over the course of my studies, and I thought, okay, well, that's where I'm going to start, is my referral letters. If I can get those people, because I feel like they know me, not just as a student, but that we've actually gotten a little bit more, we've built a pretty good rapport here. So if I can actually get them to do those referral letters, that's step one. Yes. And that's kind of where I focused. So that was, because I wanted to break it down into steps. Do that, then I can worry about the next step. I didn't start at the top. I was like, that's the hard part, because I need someone to say something good about me. But they had credibility. So they're both clinical psychologists, and so that was credibility. And I felt like that was going to be beneficial for me. So once I got those, there was a spark of like, ooh, I got that right, check. Now I can move on to the next thing. Then you have to reflect on your own process and why you want to do it, like motivate why you want to get in. And I think what I leaned back into there was just, again, tell the story. My husband said to me something that I felt was very valuable at the time was, they're not looking for you to check boxes. They're looking for you to explain who you are. And he said something incredibly kind, and I hope that everybody has somebody in their life that can tell them this kind thing, which was, you belong in this program. And so just remember that. And that if they don't take you, like, you would be a good counselor. Yes. So if they don't take you, there's something wrong with the process, not something wrong with what you've done. And so then it was literally just that, like, tell the story. And so I just did that. Essentially, I was very honest about why I wanted to do it, what I'd been through to get there, and made sure that I filled all the things correctly, because there's nothing worse than seeing an application with spelling errors, bad grammar. Those things count.
They definitely
And so it's like, tell my story, but do it within the construct of this is an academic process. So you can't write it informally. You have to do it with that sort of thing in mind. But mostly I just leaned into being as honest as I possibly could.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just curious to know, so you applied for the first time and you got in your first try?
Yeah.
Sure. So you see, guys, it's possible to get in within your first try. You don't have to try multiple times before you can get in. Like Jess has mentioned, she allowed herself to tell her story as it was and be as truthful as she was. And she took her time in filling up the applications and preparing for the applications. She didn't start from the top. She started where she felt she could start, So those are some of the things that you can definitely consider when you are applying for the program. All right. So what do you wish you had known before applying for this program?
I think the one thing that I wish I would have known before selection week is that I think, number one, the people who are evaluating you, they're going to be deadpan and they're not going to give you feedback, which is very difficult because we're used to, whether it's in a counselling space or whether you're just having a conversation with a friend, you talk, I talk, we nod, there's non-verbal communication. There is nothing from the panelists, which is very disconcerting, and it feels like rude, but it's not. They're doing it so that there can be a space where you just have to bring yourself there. And so I wish that I had known that they're doing that on purpose, but not it's not nefarious. It's not to make you scared. It's not to put you off. It's not to try and trick you. It's just to make it as neutral as possible an environment so that one person doesn't get feedback that the other person doesn't get. They want to make the playing field as even as possible. So if you go in knowing these people aren't trying to catch me out, they're not trying to trick me, they're actually doing this for my benefit. They want me to succeed. It's just the way that it is. It's trying to be neutral. So there are actually people behind those very blank faces.
Yes.
And if you can appeal to the person inside each of those, I think that's very beneficial. And I think that the other thing I would have wanted to know is that this is an extremely high responsibility profession.
Sure.
And so having now almost finished our practicum, I think we can both agree that there's no way you can prepare for this specific type of thing, because you realize how much responsibility you hold being a counselor and having to perform that role and to hold someone's emotional well-being when they really are at a very vulnerable space in their journey, in their life. And so if something happens where you don't get in, I would think that's not a discouragement. It's something that says, well, maybe I'm not ready to have that responsibility yet. And what can I do to become the type of person that can hold that responsibility? I think everybody wants to help.
Yes.
Nobody comes into this profession wanting to help. But understanding what helping is, it's not saving someone,
Yes.
It's not being the rescuer, it's not, being available 3 o'clock in the morning when someone's having a crisis. It's
Yes.
actively knowing that that's not my responsibility, where my responsibility is, where it's not. And it takes quite a lot of maturity to get there.
That's
and
true.
to learn that lesson. And I think that if I'd known how much responsibility it was, I probably might have even been dissuaded from the profession. But obviously I appreciate it now. But I think that if it would have taken a lot of pressure off me for the intake, because it would have been like, well, if I don't get in, it might not be for me right now. Maybe there's stuff that I need to work on first. Maybe there's stuff that I need to process. Maybe I need to go to therapy. Maybe I need to go to a coach. Maybe I need to volunteer a little bit first and just build that sense of responsibility, that sense of self, essentially, before embarking on this particular journey for myself.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that, especially if you've already you kind of have been in the journey. Like you mentioned, we're almost at the end of our practicum, and we're realizing the responsibility that lies in our hands, and we're realizing how big of a role we play within this mental health field, and that these are people's lives that are somewhat dependent on us. When that client walks into that session, they're literally depending on you to assist them, to facilitate the process, to collaborate with them however that process could potentially help them.
Yeah.
And that's a huge responsibility, and like you mentioned, I don't think anybody comes into the field of psychology not wanting to help, not wanting to be of help, not wanting to impact somebody's life positively.
Yeah.
So yes, it really does come with a huge responsibility, and thank you so much for sharing that. What has surprised you the most about the program?
That's a good question. I think what surprised me is learning my capacity. I think it pushes you to a place that you would never go on your own. You would never put that amount of pressure on you if someone wasn't forcing you to do that. But I think it's designed that way so that you can reach and surpass your capacity, and you can learn that you are capable of things that you never would have imagined that you're capable of. But also you can then take a step back and go, that was too much for me. I want to design my life differently. And I think what I've really come to learn is that you create your own reality. So life is not happening to you, you create life. And the more that you can, and obviously there's ways to get there, and it's a process, and like it's not as simple as, you know, if you have like there's resources and there's things, and everybody comes from a different position. But when you can start taking small steps towards what you want your life to look like, I think that is a really, really brilliant place to be. And I think that's what the program does for you, because it, from a professional perspective, goes, this is all of the things, do all of them all at once, all the time. And it's really, really stressful. But then you can recognize, wait, that was too much stress for me. I don't like that. I'm going to actually, when I design my private practice, say you're going to go into private practice, I'm going to work 4 times a week, 4 days a week. And that's what my capacity is going to be. And I'm okay with that. Or I want to work full-time and do community work because I love the intensity of it. You learn that about yourself. And I think that you have to be put into these very uncomfortable places to learn that. And you wouldn't necessarily learn that if you were being comfortable and you were just doing what was okay and what was safe. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that if you can look at the uncertainty as a beneficial aspect in your growth, then the sky's the limit, because everything that you learn about yourself, even if it's a limitation, and you go, oh, I really thought that I was capable of that, but actually I'm not. That's okay, because it gives you a better self-understanding. It goes, well, maybe I just really want to spend more time at home. Maybe I want to spend more time working out. Maybe I want to do more of nothing. Maybe I want to just have a bit more of a relaxation. Or maybe I want to hit the ground running and work in a different field. Maybe I wanted to go into addiction, but now I'm actually working with kids and it's wonderful. And I never thought I'd work with kids, but I love kids. You're going to find something that you didn't know about yourself. And one more surprise that I think I had was because my placement is working with substance users who are experiencing homelessness. And the thing that I found extremely surprising was how much hope there is in that population, and how similar we actually all are. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to be seen, they want to be heard, they don't want to be ignored. And so as a little moment of a soapbox, if there are people that you think that you know, if you see, smile at someone who has not been seen, like the person on the side of the road who's begging for change, like just talk to them for 5 minutes. They're people, exact with the same hopes and dreams as everybody. They just want to be loved, they just want to feel connected. And interestingly, that population has so much hope that things are going to get better, even though they've lost everything. And I think that was very surprising, but it also gave me a lot of hope for the future of humanity.
Sure. Wow, that is so beautifully put. And I think with everything that you've mentioned now, it reminds me of the huge role that registered counsellors play. And I think for a while, it seemed as if like registered counsellors are kind of like, it felt like there was a hierarchy when it comes to the mental health practitioners, especially mental health practitioners registered with HPCSA. It felt like there's like a hierarchy. There's this professional, that professional, that professional.
Yeah, counsellors or psychology light.
You know, and once you get into the field, you actually realize that no, we're actually really colleagues. There's space for each and every single professional, and as registered counsellors, we play a really huge role in terms of transformation within the field of psychology. We do a lot of community work, even in terms of the client based work that we do a lot of empowering and enabling our clients to be able to go and integrate themselves back into the community. And sure, I think you only realize all of that once you actually start practicing within the field. And as student registered counsellors ourselves, we only started to realize really, really how important our roles are, or our roles are going to become once we do qualify as registered counsellors.
100%. I think that thing of like a psychologist is the thing, and then like above is a psychiatrist, because they can prescribe medication but a psychologist can't, and we can't do long-term therapy but a psychologist can. So there is this element of hierarchy, but if you change your paradigm and you go, well, psychologists work with a particular scope of practice, and we have a different scope of practice where it is more community based, it's more broad scale. It doesn't mean that the impact is any less. It's just a different impact. And I think that is a really helpful thing, because I know everybody wants to go into clinical because that seems like the thing to do, because that's where we can work with the psychopathology and we can make a big impact. But if your goal is to help, I think it's really an important thing to just be open to the idea of how unbelievably important this role is as a registered counsellor, and the huge impact that you can make. And it might be different to what you thought it would be, but it'll still be a huge impact and just as meaningful.
Yes, and we all fulfill different roles within that field.
Yeah.
And we're all important.
Definitely.
Also within that field.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much for sharing that. My other question for you is, how have you managed your overall well-being during this program?
So, well-being to me was incredibly important. When I started this, especially the practicum, I think even taking a step back, going into the program, I knew it was going to be quite demanding. One, it was going to be on campus, which was a shift from being online. I live far from campus, so it's quite a lot of travel. There's still home to manage. I've got 4 children. There's like a lot of stuff. And so it was, how are we going to do this? And one thing was, I decided to trust the process and just know that it was all going to be okay. The other thing was to be very intentional about how to keep well-being. So that's the first step. It's not the secondary step. For me, well-being came first, and second was everything else. So creating a practice, one of our lecturers told us to set up rhythms of rest. And I really loved that concept better than like self-care, because self-care, number one, I think has become a little bit intangible. It's become a little bit, it's almost like a privileged thing. Like you can, like, do you have time for self-care? And do you, like, the idea of it just, it felt a little bit ick to me. But the rhythms of rest, it could be rest, actual rest, like physically sleeping or not working. But rest can also be active rest, like doing exercise. So it's resting from using my brain. And so to set up daily practices, weekly practices, monthly practices, and make sure that that was the foundation. And I made a goal with myself that after this practicum, I would not be burnt out. I've been burnt out many times before, and I was like, I'm not doing that again. So how can I do this? Almost as a sort of a psychological test for myself and a bit of internal research. Is it possible to do this without burning out at the end? And because many students do burn out. It's really intense. I thought, if anybody can do it, I can. I've been doing all the therapy, I've been doing all the work, I've got all the tools. If I can't do it, it means it's not possible. And the thing that I learned was, when you're doing the work up front, so every morning waking up, doing a meditation or doing yoga, making sure that you eat good food, you're not surviving on junk food, but also being flexible enough to know that you don't have to be so incredibly healthy that if you have a burger or you have a McDonald's, that everything's going to fall apart. So it's being conscious of what you're doing and making active choices in that way. So drinking enough water, eating food, moving when you can, doing the work where you can, being intentional about your work time, and then coming home and having some separate time, having some family time, having a shower before going to bed. For me, that was a big one, because waking up in the morning and going, oh, I have to shower in the cold morning, is too much for my brain, and I'm just going to pull covers back over and not do it. So for me, it was always having a shower before going to bed, as much as I didn't want to, and I'm so tired, I have to drag myself into the shower, making sure I did those little things. It was almost like having, like the today version of me is doing a gift for the tomorrow version of me. And so the next morning I'd wake up and be like, oh, thank goodness I showered yesterday. Now I don't have to get up and do it now. And so just doing as much as you can intentionally in advance. And it's hard work. I think there's this idea that once we do the work, we'll have mental well-being, and then we'll be fine. And then it's easy. But I don't think that's what mental well-being is. Mental well-being is a consistent, active process of making sure that you are nourishing yourself in whatever way makes you feel nourished. So this could be maintaining your physical health, your exercise routine, your spiritual well-being. All of those things play a role in your well-being, and it's not something that you notice at first. It's not like an aha moment that goes, I'm now well. It's an overall thing that you kind of actually only notice when things start to fall apart.
Yes.
So essentially, I would say that mental health is an ongoing process where you consistently put in routines that nourish your well-being in all the ways that work for you, and you do it when you don't want to, because you're not going to have the motivation to do it. There's a difference between motivation and discipline, and I think it takes discipline to maintain mental health. Yes. And it's hard, but the payout is very much worth it.
Sure, and I love how you gave the example of many people tend to go to the doctor when they're sick. And sometimes that's what we do. We first want to burn out, we first want to be extremely tired, or we wait for things to show up physiologically first, and then you realize, no, actually my mental health or my mental well-being or even my overall well-being is not in a good place, and then we want to patch it up or even fix it. Whereas it reminds me of one of the roles that we play as registered counselors, which is preventative care.
100%.
And we do a lot of preventative care, and that's the reason why we always advocate for taking care of your well-being. And it's not only just your mental well-being, but it's your overall well-being, because a lot of the things that may affect you even physically will in the end affect you mentally as well. Yes. So I really loved when you gave that example, because it really reminded me, wow, we're really in the right field, and we do a lot of this work that we do for other people actually starts with us first. So thank you so much for sharing that. My next question for you is, what advice would you give as Jess to prospective students?
I think the first thing is just get to know yourself really well in whatever way you can, whether that is journaling, whether that is going to a counselor or a therapist, challenging your own beliefs about yourself and separating yourself from what you think about the narrative you've told yourself your whole life. So I am an introvert, or am I a person first who has introverted tendencies? And just really getting to know your processes. How do I respond to anger? How do I respond in a crisis? How do I act? Where do I want to change things about myself? Where do I feel like I'm sorted? Where am I not ready to go? And will I ever be ready? And challenging yourself to get to know your shadows, essentially, the difficult bits, because that's where the magic is. It's not the accolades, it's not the things that we do well where we learn, it's the things that are hard. Yes. That's where we really learn how we can show up, that's where we learn the resilience. But just get to know yourself, because if you don't know yourself, it's going to be very difficult to separate what's yours and what's somebody else's. And you can get sucked into that very easily, where it's I don't know if this is I'm reacting to your emotions, or if I'm feeling sympathy, or if maybe I see myself in you a little bit. You need to be able to know that. And obviously once you go into the profession, you have supervision, and that's something that you continually work on. But the more you can do that up front, the better off you are. It's easier to do that first, like you were saying, the prevention. So just prepare yourself, get to know you, and then learn to love yourself, man. Like, yeah, you're a shining light, and you can do anything. You just kind of have to get through those bits of you, that inner critic. It's part of you that you can learn to give compassion to. Offer yourself self-compassion, get to know yourself, and everything else will fall into place.
And I think we tend to underestimate that saying of love yourself, and we've heard it being thrown around a lot of times, but we actually need to be intentional about doing that, and it's all in the preparation as well. If you want to become a good registered counsellor, like Jess was mentioning, there's a lot of inner work that you need to do, a lot of preventative work that you need to do. Don't want to walk into a session with a client, or even a session with a community. Maybe you're going to work in deeper within the community, and you get there and you're constantly triggered, or you're triggered to a point where you can't even function in that setup or in that setting, because remember that you become the professional in those settings and people are kind of looking towards you to facilitate the process. And if you're constantly triggered, that may become a bit difficult. So if it means going for therapy, for going for counselling before you even get into the program or apply and all of that stuff, do that. And even when you're doing the application, you can share those things as well, and share how counseling, share how therapy has really impacted you, and how that has also gotten you to a point where you feel that this is actually the field I want to go to. I've seen how it's changed my life, you know. So yeah, thank you so much.
Even if it's just for the sake of going once, just to know what it's like to be in a client or a patient's shoes, just to know how that vulnerability experience is. I genuinely believe that if every person on the planet was able to go to at least one counselling session, the world would be a better place.
Definitely.
So it's, even if you learn something that even if it's awful, you'll still learn something about yourself. I've been to a psychiatrist who was terrible, broke all the rules that thought I was on a candid camera because I thought that this can't possibly be real. And so again, that goes back to, you know, the person who is in a different role. Just because there's a psychiatrist doesn't mean that it's going to be a great psychiatrist. But I went there and what I took from that session was, I will never, in all of the control that I have, I will do everything in my power to never make a client feel the way I felt in that session. Completely unseen, completely disregarded, just awful. And so that was really valuable to know that, to feel how awful he made me feel, and just go, that's not what I want to do for somebody else. Not in a challenging way. That's always something that can be valuable. This was just completely unethical. And so even if you go to someone, you can take that experience, even if it's a bad experience, and go, what have I learned about myself from this? Maybe it's I need to put in better boundaries. Maybe I need to take better care of myself. Maybe I need to value myself better. Maybe I need to spend time with people who are good for me. Whatever you take from it, it's always going to be interesting if you go in with curiosity.
Yes. Sure. Thank you very much for sharing that. I definitely feel like that's something that we constantly have to be on the lookout for. And also the idea of, you don't only learn from your own experiences, but you also learn from experiences with other people, and then other people's experiences as well. You know, like you're mentioning, you went to a psychiatrist. The experience wasn't favorable, but you learned some stuff from that, and you learned what you don't want to be 100%. And the kind of professional you don't want to be to your future clients.
100%.
And that's very profound, because sometimes we underestimate what we can learn in those spaces and in those settings. You know, so thank you very much for sharing that. I have 2 more questions for you, and my second last question for you is, what misconceptions do students normally have about this program?
I think maybe one, that it's going to be easy. I'm not sure if that's a misconception, though. I think everyone kind of recognizes that it's going to be work. I think potentially a misconception could be that when I'm learning, I'm not going to have to do the work myself, and that I'm going to be able to help clients, and it's more of an academic, I can separate myself from it. I think when you're studying maths or engineering, it's a topic, it's an interest, or marine biology, it's something that's external. But when you're working to be a mental health professional, it's, I feel, a professional responsibility to do the work yourself as well. And you can't separate the two. And so I think if anyone comes into this profession thinking that they can just coast through, and without looking into the dark corners of your blind spots and all of your own shadows, I think that's not possible. And if you do make it possible, I think that is not going to benefit your clients at the end of the day. So I think just to be willing to do that. And then I also don't want to make assumptions about misconceptions. I'm trying to think back on like what we thought in first year, like what we thought it was going to be versus what it is. But I don't know, maybe that's an interesting thing for people to put in the comments. What do you think it is? Maybe we'll get back to everybody and say, this is not what it really is. This is the reality. But yeah, I think that just be open-minded. That's not to say that people are closed-minded, but it's just, if you come in going, these are my perceptions, maybe write them down and review them again in a year's time and did it match what your expectation was? Because that's always interesting to see where you've come from.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm actually going to pass that challenge over to our subscribers. So if you have any perspectives, views, that you maybe want to share in the comment section below, please do share some of those. If there are any misconceptions that you now realize, or misconceptions that you want to share in the comment section below as well, please do share those, and then hopefully in the future we can kind of unpack those. Maybe we can even organize like a panel sitting, as some of our members in the cohort, and we can actually answer some of those questions, answer some of those misconceptions, kind of bring in light as to what it actually is like and what it's not.
Sounds good.
Yes, I think that would be really fun. So please leave them in the comment section below and we will definitely get to them. All right, Jess, my last question for you today is, if you could change one thing about your experience, what could it be?
Sure. You're not going to like this answer, and I think the viewers are not going to like this answer either. But I wouldn't change anything because it's all valuable. It sounds so trite, but it's so true. Because every single thing that happens, every difficult thing that happens, every tear, every late night, every shower before bed, all of it comes together in every client that doesn't arrive, every time that you become disappointed. All of those things build into the resilience that you need to continue, and they get you to be where you are. So I think as an overall rule for my life, I try to have very few regrets. And if I do have a regret, then I go to therapy and I talk about that, because what did that do for you? I'm a very huge believer of things don't happen to me, things happen for me. And it's what is it showing you? What is being revealed to you? What are you there to learn about yourself when some things are really hard? What is that pushing you to learn? And I truly believe that the universe is always in it for our best interest. So even when something is really hard and it feels like everything is against you, I feel like that's still something that's valuable. So I wouldn't change anything. Maybe at the time I would, when I'm very, very stressed. But ultimately, you come out on the other end and you can see the value in all the experiences that you've had.
Sure. Wow, that's very profound. And I think it's very rare to meet somebody who would look at an experience and, as difficult as it may have been, as challenging as it may have been, have nothing that they would change. And if I could also share just a bit, I think I would also not change anything. I'm also a believer that everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. And even if it's not the way that we had planned for it to happen, it's going to work out in our good in the end. And I think with this whole process, from even, I don't even want to say from applying for the BPsych Equivalent Programme, in preparation while you're still doing your undergrad, while you're still doing your research about the program and what registered counsellors are, the journey to applying, to filling out that addendum where you have to kind of share who you are, because it's those things that affect your application as well. You can have 90%, but if they can't really sense who you are and how you would benefit the field from that from the experience that you share about yourself, it's going to be very difficult for them to say, okay, we're going to select you and we're going to shortlist you and bring you in for selection. We can kind of get to know more about you, see who is this person, So like you mentioned earlier on, it's very important for you to be as honest as possible, tell the truth in its fullest form, so that they can see exactly who you are. I also feel like I wouldn't change anything. Everything has happened for a reason. I mean, it's prepared us for here. I remember, if I can share briefly, I remember last year we had a 24-hour exam, and none of us had an idea of what that exam is going to look like, what it's going to be about, or whatever. And we stepped into the exam and we all succeeded in that exam. Literally our entire cohort, we did well in the exam. And I think that exam was somewhat preparing us for this time. Yes, it's more intense now, more intense than the 24-hour exam, but I mean, if we survived that, why won't we survive the practicum?
Definitely. I think it's one of those things, again, it pushes you. Who would ever choose to write a 24-hour exam if they had the choice? But everybody came out of that going, holy smokes, I didn't know I could do that. Probably not the healthiest thing to do multiple times,
yes,
but it does push you to limits that if you have your safety net, if you have your well-being, this is not a profession that you can go into full on intense as it always is and have that be sustainable. You need to have a safety net. You have to do things like get sleep. You have to take care of yourself. You have to look after yourself, and that really starts with valuing who you are and knowing the worth that you have, so that you can offer it to others. But once you work through these things and you actually learn how much potential you have, and you go, this was really hard, but the hard things are so valuable, because it also helps you have empathy for other people who are going through hard things, knowing that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes. Sure. Thank you so much, Jess. I think this conversation is really going to impact and impart some knowledge into a lot of individuals who have just really been looking for the information that we wish we had, when we were applying for the BPsych Equivalent Programme, which is now, by the way, I'm going to constantly mention this in pretty much all the videos, which is now the PGDip in Psychological Counselling, Postgraduate Diploma in Psychological Counselling. I wish we had videos like this where we can just sit down or hear from people who are sitting down and just having honest conversations about the journey, about what it's been like, how to prepare yourself and how they prepared themselves as well. So I really hope that everything that Jess has shared with us today is really going to help us as we prepare to apply for the Postgraduate Diploma in Psychological Counselling, and as we prepare ourselves in becoming ethical and amazing registered counselors who really do the best for their clients, who really do the best for their communities. Thank you so much, Jess. It was lovely having you. It's always lovely having conversations with you with regards to this program. I think when you mentioned that your husband told you that you were made for this program, I don't think he was lying. And I mean, I believe everybody in our cohort was literally made for this program. We're all different. But like I mentioned in the beginning, you are one of my favorite cohort members because there's so much wisdom that you really impart in us as a cohort. There's always something to learn from you, even if it's not necessarily just for this profession, but even just on a personal life or even just a personal growth kind of basis. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come and share and impart some knowledge.
You're welcome. I just wanted to add for that is that what my husband said to me, I think, was testament. He knows me, and I think that you will have people, the listeners, will have people in your life who know you, and you sometimes don't necessarily believe in you, but they can see something. So listen to them. They're right. The critic that's telling you that you're not good enough just doesn't know what they're talking about. Love the critic, give them some compassion, but listen to the people who actually know you, and you will find your way.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jess.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have other conversations on this very same channel.
Awesome.
Do a lot of work in terms of empowering, psychoeducating, especially with regards to the profession and a lot of the work that we do. So I hope this is not going to be the last time we see you on the channel. But thank you so much in imparting into this conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining into this conversation today. I hope you really learned something valuable that's going to help you in preparing for the field of registered counselling, as well as in preparing for your PGDip in psychological counselling. As we know that there isn't that much information out there, but I really hope that this is going to be that little added information that you may have needed in order to prepare for your application. So thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to leave your comments in the comment section below. Also, please, if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe, and also hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date every time we post new content on this channel. I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye.